At 6:47 a.m., March 14, 1944, Sergeant Tommy Reeves lay completely motionless in a shell crater near Anzio, Italy. 200 yards ahead, the German line was already awake. 5 enemy artillery spotters had him triangulated. 3 MG-42 machine gun nests were trained on the ground in front of him. If Reeves moved, even an inch, he would be shredded in seconds. The Germans didn't need to see him clearly. They only needed him to exist. Tommy Reeves didn't blink. He didn't adjust his breathing. He let the cold settle into his bones and waited. Because in the next 4 hours, he would eliminate every German spotter in that sector. Without firing a single shot. Using a technique his own officers had explicitly forbidden him to use just 2 days earlier. Tommy Reeves hadn't learned war in classrooms. He learned it underground. He grew up in the coal towns of eastern Kentucky, in Harlan County, where daylight was optional and darkness was permanent. His father worked the mines. His uncle worked the mines. By 14, Tommy was underground too, running messages between shaft crews in tunnels so dark you could forget the sun existed at all. Down there, light was a liability. Sound was everything. The drip of water meant limestone. The creak of timber meant pressure building. Footsteps told you who was nearby, and how fast they were moving. Tommy never carried a lamp like the other runners. He said it ruined his night vision. The older miners thought he was showing off. Until the day a tunnel collapsed. 6 men were trapped in pitch darkness. Tommy guided every one of them out. Not by sight, but by memory, sound, and feel. He had mapped the mine in his head. When war came in 1942, Tommy enlisted the day after his 18th birthday. The recruiting officer glanced at his file and sent him straight to infantry. By November, Tommy Reeves was at Fort Benning, learning how to kill men instead of avoiding cave-ins. Instructors noticed something almost immediately. During night exercises, when other soldiers stumbled, froze, or reached for flashlights, Reeves moved like he could see. He couldn't. He just knew how to listen. They made him a scout. By January 1944, Reeves was in Italy with the 3rd Infantry Division, trapped inside the Anzio beachhead, a narrow strip of land surrounded by German artillery in the Alban Hills. Every movement drew fire. Every advance was punished. Men died fetching water. The reason was always the same. German spotters. Hidden in ruins, farmhouses, and tree lines, they worked in pairs or trios with binoculars and radios. When they saw Allied movement, they called coordinates. 90 seconds later, shells arrived. Accurate. Relentless. Deadly. Entire companies vanished because someone, somewhere, had whispered numbers into a radio. Reeves watched it happen again and again. On February 8, a platoon from Baker Company moved toward Cisterna. 42 men went down in the open. Reeves knew 3 of them personally. A week later, a sniper killed a spotter in a church tower. And died 30 seconds later when the second spotter called in mortar fire. The doctrine was clear. Scouts observed. Snipers shot. Nobody crossed the line. Reeves requested permission to hunt the spotters. His lieutenant, Ambrose, denied it. Recon, not revenge, he said. Reeves understood the order. He also understood the math. As long as the spotters lived, men would keep dying. And Tommy Reeves already had an idea. One he had been testing quietly on night patrols. A method born in mines, not manuals. He called it shadow linking. And 2 days before dawn on March 14, his officers told him, never use it. Shadow linking wasn't a weapon. It was a way of thinking. Traditional scouting doctrine said one thing. Observe from distance, report, never close with the enemy. That made sense on paper. It also got people killed at Anzio. Because German spotters didn't stay still. They relocated. They overlapped sectors. They adjusted faster than artillery or snipers could respond. Reeves had watched it happen too many times. What shadow linking did was simple and insane. Instead of hiding from the enemy's vision, Reeves studied it. Not where the spotters looked, but when. Human attention wasn't constant. It pulsed. Spotters swept sectors in patterns. They checked radios. They wrote in logbooks. They handed binoculars back and forth. Every one of those actions created a moment when their attention collapsed inward, focused on equipment instead of terrain. That moment was the gap. Reeves didn't move when the enemy wasn't looking. That was impossible to predict. He moved when their attention was committed elsewhere. He linked shadows. From rubble to ditch. From tree to wall. From blind spot to blind spot. Like navigating a mine tunnel by sound and pressure instead of light. He tested it quietly on 4 night patrols. Each time, he got closer than doctrine allowed. Once, he was close enough to hear a machine gunner complain about the cold. He reported the positions. Artillery destroyed them. 0 American casualties. Reeves wrote it all down. He handed the report to Lieutenant Ambrose. Ambrose read it twice. Then he called Reeves into his tent. "This is insane," Ambrose said. "You're describing stalking, not reconnaissance." "It works," Reeves replied. "It violates every principle of scouting doctrine. The positions I observed last week are gone. 20 Germans dead, no Americans." Ambrose's jaw tightened. "Sergeant, I'm not questioning your results. I'm questioning your methods." What Reeves described required getting so close that one mistake meant death. Scouts were valuable. Disposable scouts were not. "We're losing squads," Reeves said. "Hayes is dead, Anderson is dead, 42 men from Baker Company are dead because spotters keep calling fire. And if you get killed trying this," Ambrose said, "we lose our best scout and gain nothing." Reeves didn't raise his voice. "Then I won't get killed." Ambrose stood. "I'm making this clear. You are forbidden from attempting this technique. A direct order. Standard reconnaissance only. You will not close within 100 yards of enemy positions. Understood?" Reeves nodded. "Yes, sir." He understood perfectly. He also understood that nothing would change. 2 days later, before dawn on March 14th, Reeves loaded his pack, took a trench knife, 2 canteens, and a map marked with 5 deadly spotter positions. He didn't file a patrol report. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He walked into no man's land alone. The first spotter position sat inside a collapsed barn, 300 yards northwest of the American line. Reeves had been watching it for a week. 2 German spotters worked there in rotation. One watched through binoculars, the other monitored the radio. Every 14 minutes, they switched roles. The handoff created a gap. 6 seconds where both men focused on the exchange. Not the landscape. That was the opening. Reeves reached the drainage ditch just after sunrise. 3 inches of stagnant water soaked into his uniform. The smell was rot and sewage. He lowered himself into it and began to crawl. Elbows. Knees. Slow. It took 90 minutes to cover 200 yards. He timed every movement to their routine. When the radio crackled with static. When one spotter adjusted frequencies. When the other wrote in a logbook. The sun rose behind Reeves, throwing his shadow forward, but the spotters were facing west, squinting into glare. At 7:53 a.m., Reeves was 20 feet from the barn. He could hear them now. One complained about the coffee. The other talked about a girl in Munich. Reeves waited. At 8:07 a.m., the radio came alive with an incoming transmission. Both spotters turned inward. Reeves moved. 4 seconds. He slipped through the broken wall low and fast. The first spotter turned his head, just enough to understand something was wrong. Reeves' knife slid under the jaw, angled up, severing the scream before it existed. The second spotter reached for his rifle. Reeves yanked the blade free and drove it into the man's throat. 8 seconds. No gunfire. No transmission. No warning. Reeves dragged both bodies into the cellar and buried them under debris. He smashed the radio. Then he marked the map. Position 1. Silent. The psychological barrier was gone now. The hardest part wasn't killing. It was committing. Reeves moved east toward the second position, a grove of olive trees 600 yards away. This one was harder. 3 spotters. Overlapping sectors. Better equipment. Reeves didn't rush. He watched for 2 hours. Mapped the pattern. They rotated every 20 minutes. That rotation forced them to focus on each other. Maps, radios, hand signals. Reeves moved during that collapse. 5-yard sprints, timed to the wind in the branches. Sound masking. A trick from the mines. You moved when the timber creaked, so your own noise disappeared. At 11:34 a.m., he was inside the grove. 10 feet away. The spotters argued over artillery coordinates. All three leaned over the same map. Reeves came from behind. He didn't stab. He cut. Throat first. Then arteries. Fast. Surgical. All three were dead before any hand reached a weapon. He destroyed the radio. Marked the map. Position 2. Silent. Reeves paused. Not to rest. To listen. The battlefield felt different already. Less pressure. Less inevitability. 3 positions remained. The hardest was next. Hill 73. The same hill where Staff Sergeant Hayes had died. Reeves headed that way. Hill 73 was different. No drainage ditches. No olive trees. No shadows to hide in. Just 400 yards of open ground, scattered rubble, and a ruined concrete pillbox sitting like a scar on the hillside. Inside it were 2 German spotters. The same position that had killed Staff Sergeant Leonard Hayes. Reeves watched from a shell cratered 200 yards out. Through the slit in the pillbox, he could see silhouettes moving against the darkness inside. The spotters worked with precision, binoculars up every 30 seconds. Radio checks perfectly timed. No obvious gaps. No mistakes. This wasn't a position you rushed. Reeves waited. At 1:47 p.m., one spotter set down his binoculars and unwrapped food. Bread. Canned meat. The second spotter kept scanning, but now he was doing the work of 2 men. His sweeps became faster. Less deliberate. That was the crack. Reeves moved when the spotter's eyes raced across sectors instead of studying them. He crawled. Elbows grinding into stone. Knees burning. Face pressed into dirt. Every movement anchored to rubble piles, never more than a few feet at a time. Sweat ran into his eyes. The sun was high now. No mercy from shadows. At 2:31 p.m., Reeves reached the pillbox's blind side, a collapsed section of wall on the eastern face. He could hear them talking inside. One complained about the heat. The other mentioned a girl back in Hamburg. Reeves slid along the wall. 12 feet. It took him 4 minutes. At the entrance, he paused. Listened. Chewing. Radio dials clicking. Reeves went in fast. The first spotter turned, hand reaching for a pistol on the table. Too slow. Reeves drove the knife into his chest. The second spotter dropped his food and grabbed for a rifle. Reeves ripped the blade free and threw it. The knife tumbled once and buried itself in the man's throat. Both were dead in silence. Reeves retrieved the knife. Destroyed the radio. Marked the map. Position 3. Silent. Hill 73 was finished. But Reeves wasn't. 2 positions remained. And they could see each other. Daylight was no longer an option. Reeves pulled back and waited for darkness. The last 2 spotter positions faced each other. One sat inside a burned-out farmhouse 800 yards south. The other hid along a tree line overlooking the main supply route into Anzio. If Reeves approached either one in daylight, the other would see movement and call it in. One radio call. 90 seconds. Artillery. So Reeves waited. At 6:22 p.m., the sun slipped behind the Alban Hills. The light changed. Not dark yet. Not day anymore. That was the most dangerous time. Reeves adapted shadow linking for twilight. He didn't watch the spotters directly. He watched the glow of their cigarettes. When a cigarette brightened, the man was inhaling. Eyes closed for a fraction of a second. Night vision ruined by the sudden flare. When it dimmed, the scan resumed. Those micro gaps were all Reeves needed. He moved only when the ember flared. 1 step. Freeze. Another step. At 8:04 p.m., Reeves slipped into the farmhouse. 2 spotters. One asleep in the corner. The other hunched over the radio, back turned. Reeves killed the sleeping man first, fast and silent. Then the radio operator. Both died without ever fully waking. This time, Reeves didn't smash the radio. He keyed the microphone. Transmitted 30 seconds of random static. Then silence. At the tree line, The remaining spotters would be listening now, confused, irritated, trying to figure out what went wrong. Exactly as Reeves intended. He left the farmhouse and moved toward the trees. 400 yards. 18 minutes. Darkness like home. At 8:47 p.m., Reeves reached the treeline position. A camouflage tent tucked among branches. Inside, the two spotters were arguing. One wanted to check the farmhouse. The other blamed radio malfunction. Neither was watching their sector. Reeves entered like a shadow. The first man reached for his rifle. Too slow. Reeves opened his throat. The second lunged toward the tent flap. Reeves caught him from behind, one hand over the mouth, the other driving the knife between ribs. The man convulsed once, then went still. Reeves dragged both bodies into the brush. Smashed the final radio. 5 positions. 12 spotters. 0 shots fired. Reeves sat against a tree and let the exhaustion hit him. His hands shook. His uniform was soaked with sweat and blood. His shoulders burned like broken glass. The walk back took 3 hours. He moved on instinct, not caution. At 11:53 p.m., Reeves stumbled into the American perimeter. A sentry nearly shot him. Lieutenant Ambrose was waiting. "Where the hell have you been, Sergeant?" Reeves set his pack down. His knife was still bloody. "Patrol." "Patrol where?" Reeves unfolded the map. 5 red marks. Ambrose stared. "You disobeyed a direct order." "Yes, sir." "You understand this is court-martial level insubordination?" "Yes, sir." Ambrose swallowed. "What you did crippled German artillery." Reeves met his eyes. "Hayes is still dead," he said quietly, "but nobody else has to die like that." Ambrose said nothing. What came next was out of his hands. At 6:15 a.m., March 15th, the German artillery opened its usual dawn barrage on the Anzio beachhead. At least, it tried to. The shells came in late. Then wide. Then wrong. Instead of tight bracketing fire walking onto American positions, rounds scattered uselessly across empty ground. Some fell short, others overshot completely. For the first time in weeks, men weren't pinned the moment they moved. Something was wrong. A company advanced toward Hill 73, the same hill that had been untouchable the day before. No artillery response. They reached the pillbox without taking fire. Inside, they found 2 German spotters. Dead. Radio smashed. Silence. Word spread fast. By mid-morning, patrols confirmed the impossible. 5 separate spotter positions. All gone. All radios destroyed. No gunfire reported. No German reaction. German artillery effectiveness dropped by more than 60% in a single day. The beachhead felt different. Lighter. Breathable. At 7:30 p.m., Reeves was escorted to division headquarters. He expected charges. Insubordination. Violation of direct orders. Court-martial. Instead, he found Colonel John Sherman, Division Intelligence, staring at Reeves' map. "Sergeant Reeves," Sherman said, "you've created a problem." "Yes, sir." "Lieutenant Ambrose wants you court-martialed." Reeves didn't respond. Sherman continued. "In the last 24 hours, German artillery accuracy has dropped 63%. He looked up. "That means you've saved more lives in one day than most soldiers save in an entire war." Sherman leaned back. "We can't court-martial you. Morale would collapse. But we can't reward you either." Reeves waited. "So we're doing something else." Sherman slid the map forward. "You're going to teach this technique. Not to scouts. To a specialized unit. Men trained to get close. Eliminate spotters. Destroy radios. Disappear. We're calling it deep reconnaissance," Sherman said, unofficially. Reeves understood what that meant. No medals. No paperwork. No mistakes allowed. "And you don't get shot," Sherman added. "Those are the terms." "Yes, sir." Reeves left headquarters that night expecting prison. Instead, he'd been given a command. The unit never had a patch. It never had a name anyone was supposed to say out loud. On paper, they were listed as deep reconnaissance sections, temporary attachments drawn from scouts, snipers, and men who had already learned how to move quietly. In reality, everyone called them Shadow Link teams. Captain Williams, a former OSS officer from North Africa, helped Reeves build the first group. 12 men. No speeches. No slogans. No promises of glory. Reeves taught them one rule first. Shadow linking isn't about speed, he said. It's about timing. They trained at night. Mock German positions were set up across the beachhead, observers with binoculars. Radios, logbooks. Reeves placed the observers himself, then sent his men in. The first week, everyone failed. They moved too fast. They forced gaps that didn't exist. They trusted darkness instead of attention. The second week, half failed. By the fourth week, success rates hit 80%. Reeves taught them how to read people, not terrain. How attention narrows. How fatigue creates mistakes. How men always focus inward before they look outward again. He taught them to move when binoculars changed hands. Radios crackled. Maps unfolded. Cigarettes flared. And when not to move. Even if it meant lying still for hours. On April 23, the teams ran their first operational mission. German spotter networks had reformed near Cisterna, coordinating artillery that stalled the Allied breakout. 4 positions. 8 spotters. Sophisticated equipment. Reeves split the team into pairs. Each pair took one position. Reeves took the hardest. A bell tower overlooking the main road. His partner was a thin kid from Brooklyn named Marcus Toiver, a former burglar who could pick locks in total darkness and move without sound. They watched the tower for hours. Every 6 minutes, one spotter descended to check supplies. 30 seconds alone. That was the gap. At 2:38 a.m., the first spotter went down the stairs. Reeves moved up. The second spotter never saw him. Reeves' knife ended it before the man could turn. Below, Toiver handled the other. Both radios were destroyed. By 4:47 a.m., all 4 positions were silent. 0 shots fired. 0 American casualties. The Allied offensive launched at dawn. German artillery fired blind. The breakout succeeded. The Germans noticed. They didn't know how. But their spotters were disappearing. Positions that had been secure for months were wiped out overnight. Bodies were found with throats cut. Radios smashed. No shell casings. No alarms. A German after-action report from July described it best. Whoever eliminated our observers did so in darkness, without gunfire, and without triggering any defensive response. Current security measures are ineffective. They tried changing doctrine. More guards. Tighter perimeters. More machine guns. It didn't help. Shadow linking wasn't an attack on defenses. It was an attack on attention. By summer, German artillery effectiveness across Italy had dropped dramatically. Casualty rates in sectors using shadow link teams fell by over 40%. The teams moved constantly. They didn't stay in camps. They didn't talk. They didn't explain what they did. They appeared at night, then vanished. Reeves kept it precise. Spotters. Radio operators. Forward observers. No general infantry. No rear area troops. When a general from headquarters tried to shut the program down as assassination, Reeves said only one thing. They're killing us first. The program stayed. Quietly. By the time the Italian campaign ended, shadow link teams had eliminated hundreds of German spotters. But none of it went into doctrine. None of it went into speeches. And none of it came with medals. When the war in Italy ended, shadow link teams disappeared. No debriefs. No manuals. No official recognition. Their reports were classified. Their names stayed off citations. Their work was absorbed quietly, then buried. On May 10, 1945, 2 days after Germany surrendered, Tommy Reeves was discharged from the army. Rank: Staff Sergeant. No medal. No commendation. No ceremony. He took a bus back to Harlan County, Kentucky. Went back to work. Construction at first. Then the mines again. Because that was what men did in Harlan County. He married a woman named Sarah who worked at the diner on Main Street. They had 3 children. Tommy never talked about the war. Not to his wife. Not to his kids. Not to anyone. Once a year, on March 14th, the phone would ring. It was Marcus Toiver, the burglar from Brooklyn who'd become one of the best Shadow Link operators in Italy. They talked for 10 minutes. Not about the war. Just enough to confirm they were both still alive. You still having the dreams? Sometimes. Me too. Then they hung up and went back to their lives. Tommy Reeves died on January 4, 1987. Heart attack. Age 62. His obituary ran 4 paragraphs in the Harlan Daily Enterprise. One paragraph mentioned his military service. Mr. Reeves served with distinction in the United States Army during World War II. Stationed in Italy with the 3rd Infantry Division. That was it. No mention of shadow linking. No mention of 12 spotters eliminated in one day. No mention of the 400 more eliminated by the teams he trained. At his funeral, about 70 people showed up. Marcus Toiver flew in from New York. Captain Williams came from Virginia, gray-haired now. A dozen other men Reeves had trained stood quietly in the back. They didn't say much. After the burial, Captain Williams approached Sarah. "Your husband saved my life," he said. "Probably saved it more than once." Sarah nodded. "He never talked about it. He wouldn't have. That was Tommy." Years later, a military historian pieced the story together from declassified reports. The math was simple. Shadow Link teams reduced German artillery effectiveness by nearly 60%. Across the Italian campaign, that translated to roughly 1.600 Allied soldiers who came home instead of dying on hillsides no one remembers. No statues. No medals. No monuments. Just men who got to see their families again. That was Tommy Reeves' legacy. Not glory. Absence. The absence of funerals. The absence of folded flags. The absence of names carved into stone. That's how innovation really happens in war. Not through committees. Not through doctrine written far from the front. But through sergeants who watch their friends die and decide they won't watch anymore. Through men who break rules because the rules are killing people. Through techniques born in darkness and taught in whispers. Because official channels move too slow. And men are dying too fast. Shadow linking violated doctrine. It violated theory. But it worked. And in war, working matters more than being correct. Tommy Reeves understood that. So he did what needed to be done. Accepted the consequences. And went home.